Hi everyone, it's Nicole here today with some Spotlight Inlay Cards. This is a showcase featuring the March 2019 My Favorite Things release. I'm going to start by showing you the cards. I used the brand new A2 rectangle frames die for all three of the cards today to create this really cool dimensional frame that's been inlaid and then stacked to showcase the scene or images inside. For this first card, I used the new Just Ducky stamps and dies for this scene, as well as the previously released Grassy Edges stencil, and then the brand new Ray of Light stencil. So that was what was used for this, a little no-line coloring for those Just Ducky images. This card is very similar. I used a smaller frame for this one, and this time I used some of the Easter Bunnies stamp set and then the coordinating dies. So this is what that stamp set looks like. So cute. Perfect for Easter and spring. So there are the first two cards, very similar in color and design. My third card features this beautiful fresh cut flowers cling background, stamped and embossed, and then watercolored with the Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers. And then the sentiment is from the Anything But Basic Encouragement stamp set, and it was stamped and embossed on a vellum stitched fishtail sentiment strip. Those strips were previously released, so I'm kind of mixing and matching a few previously released products with all of these brand new ones. Let's start with the Just Ducky card and stenciling the background for this scene. I love scenes that go from side to side, top to bottom, but I like having some sort of border or frame that helps kind of showcase or gives that really great framed up effect, but still contains all of the background. In this case, we're going to build our background with stencils. I am using some of the life-changing blending brushes with Mode Lawn Distress ink on regular Nina heavyweight 110-pound weight smooth white cardstock, inking up this bottom portion with the Grassy Edges stencil. I started with the grass first. The yellow ink colors are light enough that I think I can just kind of blend those into the grass edge, which did work out fine. And I want to build that intensity, especially along the jagged grassy edge, before moving on to the brand new Ray of Light stencil. I am always a huge fan of any ray of light or sun rays type of stencil. I think they can be used in so many different ways, which is incredible and really fun to do. I did take a little Post-it tape and tape my stencil down in place just to hold it down, keep everything from shifting too much. I am working on a glass mat and this worked very easily. Now I'm going to stencil the rays first, then I will remove the stencil and go in and add some ink to any of those white areas. So it's going to be a little bit more subtle design along the top edge, but you're still very much going to get the rays effect. It's just not going to be quite as sharp as the grassy edge, which is what I was going for. I am using a combination of squeezed lemonade and mustard seed distress inks. What I love is using the regular distress inks with these blending tools because they apply and blend beautifully. We're going in now and adding that darker, deeper color. That's going to really help add that beautiful color to the sky. Another idea is you could always add your yellow ink colors first to the background, just kind of blend them in, and then go in with your rays and add that on top of what you've already done. I am using very tone on tone. And you can see I don't like the white stripes. I think it really takes away from the sunshiny look that I'm going for, like the sun is rising in the morning. So that's why I'm going in and adding more color on top to really make that sky nice and bright yellow. It's going to show off the Just Ducky images perfectly. We're building this background first so I can kind of show you how we're building the scene. I'm almost always creating my scene background and then adding the images. You noticed at the beginning of the video I had the stamps laid out and the frame die I'm going to use laid out, so I had an idea of how many images I had to fit within the space, kind of the area, the surface area I needed to fill, and all of that. I always like starting with a general idea. You can add more later if need be. There is no right or wrong for sure. It just gives you a really good starting point. Here is my die. We're going to die cut this shape from our background then. I highly recommend using a little repositionable tape, washi tape, something like that, so that your die does not shift in the die cutting machine. And then we're going to die cut this, but we are keeping all three pieces: the outer frame, the thin A2 rectangle frame, and then the inside piece. Nothing is going to waste. Our design is still going to go side to side, top to bottom, but that framed area is going to be popped up because we will be die cutting 2 additional frames from white cardstock that will be adhered first, with the final frame being the stenciled frame. I'm stamping now the Just Ducky images I'm using for the design on Bristol Smooth cardstock with the Fade Out ink. This is a fantastic ink for no line coloring of any kind. I am using Bristol Smooth cardstock and Zigs today, which is my preferred paper for the Zig markers, is the Bristol Smooth cardstock. And then I'm simply coloring in my images. You do not have to work super fast, but I would recommend doing your coloring in one sitting because the ink does fade out, as the name implies, and you are left with this beautiful no line look. In fact, as I started to color, I thought that the outline area where I had put my darkest bright yellow color might be a little too harsh, and I was really afraid I was going to need to re-stamp and color my little ducky here. And it ended up letting it sit overnight and coming back to it after I had colored everything. The images were just so darling and really fun, and I was extremely happy with the color choices. Lots of pinks and light blues and purples and yellows and greens. Very springtime colors was the color palette I went for with all of my cards today. I really wanted to showcase bright and fun. We'll start coloring in the next ducky here. I have sped up the video quite a bit, but I've left the coloring in for those who enjoy the coloring process. I lay down my dark colors first, then pull that color out with my lighter markers and clean the tip off on a scrap piece, or in this case the bottom part of my cardstock, so that I am not transferring the darker color to other areas of my image. I'm going to save adding in the eye with a black glaze pen until after I have die cut these images. The reason being is the black jelly roll pen I use for doing that, I feel like flattens when you run it through the die cutting machine and you lose that great effect. So I will always die cut the images and then come back and add that in after they have been die cut, no matter if I'm doing no line coloring or traditional coloring. This little one has a jump rope. I am pulling in a little red here. This design, the reds I chose are more on the pink spectrum. They're a little cooler than a darker red might be. So I think they work really well with the bright, vibrant colors of the rest of the design. But I wanted to pull in red into the kite. And so this was a great area or a great way to add that into another image on the design. So there's a little bit of red in the kite, the little bow on the kite string, and then the jump rope. As well as when I add embellishments to the card, those are going to be in the same kind of reddish pink color family. Our third ducky, there's actually 4 in the set. I only used 3 today. There's also a little cart and trees and then cloud images, which I did use both cloud images. I will be stamping the smaller of the clouds twice and coloring that in with a haze blue marker and blending it out with the blender pen to give just a little bit of color to those. The clouds add a fantastic effect to the sky and help break up all of that inking and stenciling in the upper part of the design. So the shirt colors are pink, blue, and purple. Very much our pastel color family here. And then for the kite and string, I'm going around and doing a red section, a kind of yellow-orange section with bright yellow and yellow. The red was carmine red and light carmine. And we're doing the little bows on the bowstring, on the kite string in the same colors. Then we've got light green and yellow green. And we'll finish with cobalt blue and light blue for the last section. I love that little kite taking shape. For the kite string, you could use a fine tip pen if you wanted to. It might be a little easier than the brush tips of the zig markers. I did use a brush tip from the zig marker. Just tried to use a really light hand and go nice and slow and draw that in and add that to the design. I also did the same thing for the jump rope where I used carmine red for the jump rope string. We're going to trace around the edges of the clouds with a haze blue marker and then blend that out with the clear blender pen. This is a fantastic addition to the zig markers. You can use it with any of the colors to kind of lighten or tone them down and blend them out. I've die cut my images and I'm going to take my black glaze pen and add the eyes back in, and now their little faces really shine. Let's go ahead and put our background together with the inlay, add our sentiment, and then add in all of our images. Again, the A2 rectangle frames, this is the second largest in the set, is what I used to create this framed up area on my design. And I'm grabbing that last cloud real quick. I just stamped it with a clear block and colored it in before die cutting it. I decided after I had laid out the images that I really needed 3 clouds. I like my embellishments in odd numbers. When I'm doing an inlay like this, I really like to take my card base and cover the front with adhesive. I usually use a nice strong adhesive. This is the Glue Glider Pro adhesive, and I'm just putting it all over the front, and that's going to allow me to put together my background. So starting with the outer background first, then a white frame, and I want to fit that within the first frame, so I'd go around kind of gently and slowly and finish with the inside stenciled piece. Now this frame is wide enough that 1/8 inch double-sided tape works great. I actually went around the whole frame with that instead of a liquid adhesive, so no mess. And I'm going to stack the next white frame on top. And then I'm going to do the same thing again and finish with our stenciled frame. This makes the frame pop, yet we don't lose any of the amazing stenciled detail around the edges. So just carefully lining that up, pressing that down in place. Isn't that background fun? I love this technique. For this design, the sentiments from the Just Ducky stamp set are going to fit on the frame itself. So I stamped my sentiment with green ink along that bottom edge. I chose the phrase, "Every day with you is just Ducky." So fun, cute little punny way to add a sentiment. I'm doing this in my MISTI so I can get it lined up perfectly and stamp it more than once if I need to. And now I'm ready to glue my little ducks and clouds in place. I'm going to score that with a bone folder really quick. And then I'm taking some liquid adhesive and popping my images down. I'm using the Gina K Connect glue. I'm really loving this kind of glue lately. Haven't had to worry about any of my images falling off. Now before the glue on the kite dries, I did tuck a cloud underneath there. We'll glue down these remaining images, and I'm going to finish this design with the Honeybee Stamps Candy Hearts in the color Kiss Me. This is kind of a peachy, pinky red color. It definitely goes more towards the red, but it's not super duper red. I think it works really well with the pastel colors of this card design. And I'm going to glue those in place to finish the card, 3 up at the top and 1 at the end of the sentiment. My next card example, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, is very similar to the card we just finished, so I won't be sharing a ton of the same steps since most of it is exactly the same. I did add 2 layers of grassy edges to the bottom of this one instead of just 1. So that's what I'm doing here, just layering that stenciling along the bottom edge. The top of this with the ray of light stencil is going to be created exactly like the first card. So I'm going to layer or do my stenciling, remove the stencil, and then go back in and add that color to the background so the entire top of the card has all of the yellow. But this time we're going to use images from the Easter Bunnies stamp set, and this card is also positioned in a portrait style instead of landscape. We'll be using a smaller frame from that A2 rectangle frames set, so you can see what it looks like even with a smaller frame. The design, the background still goes from edge to edge. Instead of doing no line coloring this time, I stamped my images on Bristol Smooth cardstock. I just have a scrap here with VersaFine Onyx black ink, and then I'm coloring them in with my Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers. The bunny is in natural gray and cool gray with a little pink haze for the insides of the ears and for the cheeks. And I laid down hardly any of the natural gray, and I'm pulling that color out with the cool gray and finishing even with the blender pen to lighten that even more. We're going to color the bunny in, and then we will move on to the cart before adding all of the bright colorful images. So in this stamp set, there are three different bunny images. So cute. Definitely very fun, perfect for Easter. Then there's 2 butterflies, which I will be using in my card. I'm going to stamp a 3rd butterfly from one of those images. As I mentioned, again, I like my embellishments in odd numbers. We're going to use the little stack of Easter eggs image, and then there is a little potted tree with the Easter egg hanging off of it. So lots of images. There's 3 different greetings in this, and we're going to use 2 of them for our card. I stamped Happy Easter in the upper part of the frame using a yellow ink on the yellow background, and then I stamped You Make Me Smile from Ear to Ear with a green ink along the bottom edge of the card. This time we didn't stamp the sentiments directly on the frame. I left all of the coloring in the video so you can see what I'm coloring and what colors I'm using. Many of these colors, in fact, the majority of them with the exception of the bunny and the cart, I've used in the first card. I tried to keep my colors very similar throughout all 3 cards today, even though the last card is definitely much different. It's florals and not a scene card like these first 2. It's just the same technique. I wanted to really showcase how this same technique can be used for all kinds of cards, not just scenes. These wonderful Easter eggs are a great opportunity to really showcase lots of fun colors. So I definitely did that. Used lots of color in all of the eggs so that they would really show up and pop. Then our butterflies are going to be in pinks, purples, and the final butterfly, the extra butterfly that I stamped, is in blue. I wanted something that would pop off of the yellow background, and I didn't want to use either of the colors I used for the stenciling, so no yellows or greens. We'll die cut these with the coordinating dies, and then I've already put my frame together. I've already done the inlaying. Again, this was exactly like the first card, just using the smaller frame. I stamped my sentiments, and then I'm gluing my images in place. The final thing that I will do for this card design is take my black glaze pen and add the detail back into the eyes on the bunny, use that black pen for the bodies of the butterflies, and then I'll take a white pen and add the little highlight back into the bunny's eyes. And this card will be finished like the first one with some Honeybee Stamps candy hearts. This is in the Hug Me color, which is the pink. I thought the pink worked much better. There's no red in this card. In the first card, I had the red in the kite and in the kite string and in the jump rope. So pulling that red into the hearts worked really well. For this card, red, I think, would have taken away from the design. So I chose the pastel pink hearts for this one. And we're going to put one down below the sentiment along the bottom edge, and the rest will be scattered throughout the top part of the design, kind of intermixed with the butterflies, and then continuing and finishing up along the top edge. I like to lay them out first, get a good idea of where I want them all to go before I adhere them. I use a crystal katana and then just liquid adhesive. The crystal katana picks up these little pieces perfectly, helps keep your fingers out of the glue, which I always appreciate. So cute. I think if you flipped this card to the side in the landscape format, you could even include more of the bunnies, much like I did for the first card where I used multiple ducks. You could use multiple bunnies a lot easier if you flipped this into the landscape style. And then, of course, I'm going to add that remaining butterfly kind of in between the pink and the purple one along the edge of my frame. For my last card share today, we're going to do something a little bit different than the first 2 cards. They were very similar, had very similar backgrounds, used the same background products, just different images. This one is going to be a floral card. There is a beautiful new stamp in the March release called Fresh Cut Flowers Background, and this is a rubber cling stamp. Big, bold. You're going to see that it's going to fit the entire card front, and we are going to stamp, emboss, and then watercolor with zigs and a water brush pen. We're going to watercolor the background around this to add color, and once this background is dry, we will be die cutting it with one of those A2 stitched frame, or not stitched, A2 rectangle frames, and doing the same kind of effect, which really frames up the design beautifully. It's a super simple way to add some nice definition around the edges of the card. So I've stamped and I'm embossing this with white embossing powder. This is one of my favorite ways to watercolor. It contains that color inside the embossed line. It's a little hard to see what I'm doing until I get some of that color down. So let's just start with the flower. I'm following around the edges, laying down my darker of the two purple colors I'm using, which is light violet and pale violet. And then I lay down the dark, I pull that color out a little bit with my lighter marker, and then I take the water brush pen and watercolor those petals to finish adding color. We'll color a couple of the flowers and part of the greenery in the design. And then I did go ahead and decide to add color, add the background color all the way around to help show off the images that we're coloring a little bit better. But there is that beautiful purple flower taking shape. This card could be used for any occasion depending on what sentiment you add to it. Beautiful, beautiful flowers. And it's a nice bold image. So now I'm adding the pinks, which are peach pink and sugared almond pink, to the next floral. We'll just pull that color out a little bit. And add the water brush pen. You can start to see the image take shape a little bit the more color I get added to this. So while I used Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers for all my cards today, I did 3 different types of coloring. The first card was no line coloring. The second card, I stamped it traditional and just colored it in with the Zig markers. And then this one is a stamped and embossed image, watercolored with the Zig markers. Adding that water in gives you that much looser type of color within the embossed area. My greens are light green and yellow green. And after I pull in some of this color, before we color in the remaining flowers and buds at the top of the card, this is where I'm going to take my background color and I'm going to scribble it on my glass mat. This is deep blue, and I'm going to add water to it and then pick it up and bring it to my background. I prefer to scribble it on an acrylic block or a glass mat or something like that and pick up the color and take it to my card rather than tracing around the edges and then trying to blend it out. In this case, the color is dark enough that it's really going to take away, I think, or maybe make too harsh of a line, I guess I want to say, around the edges, and I want it to be really soft. I'm not worrying too much about perfection, the kind of messy edges, the watercolored effect. I did not go clear to the edge. I did that on purpose, is the look I'm going for. And I'm working in small areas, blending out before I move on. Once I have finished the background, I'm going to add in the rest of my color to the remaining flower and buds. So we've got bright yellow, yellow, and then we're going to do some pinks and purples again to finish off all of these. Make sure your background is completely dry before you die cut it. You can hit it with a heat tool if you want to. I let it air dry. It does air dry fairly quickly. I'm not adding loads of water to this, so it's not really curling up a ton or anything like that, or there's not pools of water needing to dry. It just takes maybe 30 minutes or so, and it should be dry enough to run through the die cutting machine. You just don't want to transfer any of that ink onto your cutting plates or mush it and have it spread out beyond the embossed lines and ruin all your hard work. So there is that beautiful floral background. Just like we did with the 2 previous cards, I am putting nice strong adhesive all over the front of my card base. And then starting with the outer frame, I am rebuilding the design with inlay. So the outer frame, now a white frame, and finishing with the inside panel. What I love about this is this floral design is large enough that there is little pieces of it in that outer frame. A little bit of the purple flower, the stem, and then the tip of a green leaf. We're going to take our 1/8 inch double-sided tape again and stack our frames one on top of another. So 2 white frames. The first one is inlaid into the background, and then we're stacking 1 white frame on top, and we'll finish with the stamped and watercolored frame. For a different look, you could leave that off altogether and just have a colorful frame. I think that's a neat look as well. Adding that last layer. Now for this card, the sentiment I'm going to use is from the new Anything But Basic Encouragement stamp set. This is an awesome all sentiment stamp set that has all kinds of encouraging greetings. I think these kind of stamp sets or sentiment sets are fantastic and work for so many different cards. We're going to choose the I Believe in You sentiment. I've also already die cut a stitched fishtail sentiment strip from vellum that I'm stamping my sentiment on with clear embossing ink and heat embossing with white embossing powder before trimming off one of the banner ends. I'm going to run this through a Xyron sticker maker so it hides the adhesive on the back of this, and then pop it right over my background. I didn't want to lose any of the detail of the flowers, and so I opted to do a vellum banner over my card. I'm just going to mark it with my fingernail and then trim off. I'm going to figure exactly where I want it to go, and then I'm going to mark it and trim off that right side, run it through the Xyron sticker maker, and pop it in place. Just like my previous 2 cards, we're going to finish embellishing with some super simple little embellishments. This time I'm using a Honeybee Stamps Crystal Clear Heart on the banner, and we'll be using some Pretty Pink Posh Pansy Purple Jewels scattered throughout, which really match the colors of the background beautifully, I think. So there is my little banner in place, and you can see no adhesive globbed up and looking through, which I really like. That looks so pretty. And that's going to finish up my cards today. Thank you so much for joining me for the Spotlight Inlay Cards featuring the My Favorite Things March 2019 release stamps and dies. The supplies I used are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Here are a couple more videos featuring my favorite things that you might be interested in. Thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll catch you next time.